Hello everybody, I'm Alexei Kraber, the organizer of SF Scala, and here we're on location at Twitter headquarters, and we have this amazing meetup about functional programming and machine learning, and it's about reproducibility. And one of the topics we never covered before is Basel build system. We learned about it from Oscar Boykin, who is a big champion in the community, and he's going to mention it in his main talk. And so we thought we'll get somebody to talk about Basel specifically, and we're very fortunate to have Ulf Adams, who is the technical lead for Basel, who is actually based in Munich, and he is visiting. So this all coincided beautifully. Welcome, Ulf. We're really happy to have you. So in our corner of the woods, we use very esoteric things to build things. Like we have SBT, which was supposed to be a simple build tool, and now like one of the most complex build tools in the world. And we have some other. Twitter uses Pants, which is its own monorepo or a gigantic build system, using Python. And then we have some newcomers, Mill and CBT. So we have. Programmers are very fond of build systems. So we love this, and so it's exciting to hear about Basel, but we don't know much about it. So can you tell us a little bit briefly, what is it, how many people use it, what is it good for?
Well, Basel started out as Google's build system, and then a couple of years ago we decided to open source it.
Okay.
And you may know the name of Google's build system is Blaze, and Basel is sort of a rearrangement of the letters. We couldn't use the term Blaze because of trademark reasons. And Google is using it for basically all of its internal projects. Not for everything. If you know Chrome or Android, those aren't using Basel yet. We're working on that.
So it is basically used for building very big code bases.
Yes, you could say that.
So I think majority of folks in the community probably didn't build this kind of stuff, right? So is it what kind of challenges happens there? Is it kind of as complex as the code base you're building? Is it much more complex than Make? From 1 to 10, right? If Make is 3, how complex is Basel?
Basel is certainly a lot more complex than Make. And if you're dealing with such a big code base, everything becomes a challenge. One of our biggest challenges is that naive implementations of dependency data structures and algorithms often run into quadratic performance and memory consumption. And at Google scale, that's already a problem. Right? We have to get it down from quadratic to linear, and that requires very, very careful coding. And using all the right tricks, and using all the tricks in our repertoire to get it down to linear. Okay,
and so is it inherently parallel? Is it basically runs on a cluster by default?
So Basel itself doesn't, but it does. It is able to run individual actions in parallel if they are independent. So let's say you have a Scala program, and it consists of 2 libraries, and the libraries don't do anything with each other, then it can compile them in parallel. And it can do that on different machines. So what we do at Google is that we have a machine cluster with a couple thousand machines or so, and then you can use as many of them as are currently free to do your build.
Okay. So what is the typical load? How many machines are typically used? Give it a number. In production, right? Like for any kind of thing.
I don't know.
Okay.
I don't know.
I'm talking tens, hundreds, thousands,
Well, if you look at Basel, Basel will run about a couple hundred threads, and if there is that much parallelism in your build, then it will actually use a couple hundred machines to do that.
Okay. So for you, it's not a problem to harness 200 machines and.
No problem.
Okay, cool. So and how language agnostic is it, right? So we kind of we're mostly in Scala in this particular meetup, but if there are multilingual people doing, Twitter itself is multilingual. So how language specific is it?
Well, it certainly has its roots in C++ and Java because those are the main languages at Google. But we've been using it for basically anything. There are people using it for Scala, Kotlin, Fortran, Haskell, you name it, we have it. basically. I think there were even people who were using it for Pascal, which I'm not sure if I even remember how Pascal is written, but you know, that sort of distant past.
Right.
But yeah.
Somebody's still using it. It's all there.
It's all there.
It's all there.
It's all there.
So is it hard to, you know, let's say Rust people suddenly learn about, you know, like they like Bazel and they want to do it. So how hard is it for a new group to use Bazel for their build?
Well, it certainly requires some investment to learn how Bazel works. You need to understand some of how Bazel works in order to be able to extend it. Because of the scale issues, we have developed very special data structures and algorithms to handle that scale. And so if you extend it, you also need to be involved in that. That said, the community has been able to write Rust rules, actually, and Scala rules and Kotlin rules with fairly little help from us. So it doesn't seem too hard. But
okay.
I'm not a good judge for that.
Okay. So you mentioned that basically Bazel kind of has its roots in Google's own build system, right? So would you say that this is kind of, it has almost like a decade or more of experience? So is it really, so basically it was tested at all the scale, right? And so it's really mature build system. It's open sourced recently, but it's actually very well tested.
Yes.
Okay.
It's over 10 years old now. It was, you know, the first lines of code were written over 10 years ago. And it has grown with Google. Google wasn't, you know, 10 years ago, Google wasn't actually as big as it is today. The code base wasn't as big. And so we had a lot of problems we discovered as we were going along.
So what got you interested in the space?
Well, I applied at Google, and so I went to the office for the first time, and the site lead told me, well, there are 2 projects that you could work on. How about you talk to the respective leads, and then you can make a decision where you want to go. And so I went to the first guy, and he was sitting at his computer, and I was like, so what's your project about? Well, you have to like it to work on it. Okay, but what is it about? All right, so that wasn't the one that I chose. And then I went over to the other guy, and he said, look, let me start this build here, and we'll let it run in the background while I explain how the architecture is, how it works, how it's set up, how it's distributing builds in the data center. I was like, whoa, that's what I want to work on. This is so cool. And then I stuck with it, and so I've been working on Bazel for 9 years now.
Wow, that's so almost as long as it exists then.
Well, not quite.
Not quite. So, but did you do build systems before? Did you like make? Did you like to write make rules?
Not at all. I just, started to work on it at Google, and it kind of grew on me.
Interesting. And so you mentioned that the team is now distributed. So you have folks in Europe, you have folks on the East Coast, but you said there is almost nobody in the Bay Area where Google started. So what, was it an evolution? I mean, did they migrate?
Well, the manager of the group at the time thought it was a good idea to have people working on it in Munich for, I don't know for what reasons. And so he started the group in Munich, and then the group in Munich was actually the main group working on the build system for a while. And then Google hired a director in New York to work on developer tools, and a second group started to work on it from New York.
Interesting. Yeah, I mean, I know many folks from Google, but this is interesting to me. Like the heart, the build system is not really developed in the main campus, which is interesting. But maybe that has advantages, right? Because when Wake Up, you guys already did everything. So everything is ready.
Exactly.
Right? So this is great. We're really happy, to learn more about this. So we're looking forward to your main talk, and we're fortunate to have you here. So welcome back anytime and tell us more about Bazel.
Thanks.
Thank you all. Appreciate it.